Akoma. Loichbach neenok ngaranak monok. Yori loichbach neenok ngaranak monok. Dayawin nginak kalnyach waka. Yalapnan. Nginak yakapnayen waka paparipna. Nginak tolanya kanyen bena waka. Nginyakanginak. Nga ngaran Aretha. Yang yakapna naranya dolanya kan. Pikurum jangin aliarabela. Yori yin bena. Dolanya kan onna yalapnen galanya malauko wakan. Borak nginak napun.
To understand this country's story is to understand the language and the history that belongs to her. My mother tongue, Yoriora, is the language of this beautiful country, and how the translation into English unveils the true uniqueness and sacredness she offers. Throughout the period of this country's hostile invasion, my family experienced brutal atrocities over 5 generations, and yet managed to keep their dignity, pride, and old stories alive, with remnants of the language also surviving. I always thought it was an amazing feat in itself, as it was hard enough for the people to stay alive and together on top of what they faced daily, just to survive. My great-grandmother was removed from Yalupna at the age of 5, and was the great-granddaughter of Barkabilly Dhulanyakan, also known as King Billy of Yalupna, the head ceremony leader of Yoriora. Teresa was fortunate enough to know not only her language, but all the languages of her grandparents and the neighbouring languages of Yoriora. She handed down many stories to my Auntie Hillis Maris, as Auntie Hillis was inquisitive enough to ask and record. I was even more fortunate when it came to my turn for asking the questions. All the answers were available to me. I thank my beloved who cared enough and was strong enough to retain the sacred information for future generations to enjoy and share our culture and stories.
I was very inquisitive and I used to wonder, I'd love to talk that language. Why don't you teach me? That's what I said to my grandmother.
You've got to learn it when you're small, eh?
Yeah, you've got to learn it as a young child.
Yeah,
a young child and be only it's only spoken to you all the time when they wanted anything or wanted to do something and wanted to show you anything. You've got to have to be a very young person to do that. It's just like the Italians and the Greeks and that's all they do in their own home is speak their own language.
When they're babies, they speak
they speak their own language. But they weren't allowed, people weren't allowed to do that. And they did have fears of the managers that came there, you know.
I have developed a Yoriora language program at Gowrie Street Primary School in Shepparton, so I can contribute my part to the revival and reclamation process, which I have no doubt is not going to happen overnight, but has to start somewhere. The journey has been a long journey, but I have finally arrived home. I love to learn, but going to school for me was not about going to get a good education. For me, it was about learning to defend myself and the true story of this country, Australia. Yes, it started young. And I can remember standing in grade 2 class telling my teacher she was lying about Australia's history. I knew what the repercussions were, but that didn't stop me. All I knew is the truth had to be told. My mum, Margaret Werapunda Briggs, and Nan, Mrs. Geraldine Rose Briggs, were known to be Aboriginal women activists. But to me, they were my mum and Nan. Strong Dhulanyakan Yoriora women who dedicated their whole lives to empowering the Aboriginal community and defending our rights to the land. They were my educational encyclopedias and professors on Black Australian history, Black people history of the world in general. As the women of the family, they held centuries-old knowledge and stories handed down from the old women who lived before them, our history on what they experienced while adapting to their situation they lived in at the time as Aboriginal women.
Koori people, well, Aboriginal people or Indigenous people around Australia, have all had the same thing witnessed, you know?
Yeah.
And but it's taught it's got a different name in each place that they go to. This bloke goes to what it is, just like the Featherfoot, you know, with all the fears that they had about that, the Featherfoot. And they were the times when it was back then that there were some clever men around, you know, when I was growing up.
In those days?
Yeah, when I was growing up there, and I've seen it. Six or seven. There used to be standing there with a skinny little black chin looking up at my grandparents, listening to them. They're going for it in the language, you know, the term. That's the only time that they'd ever talk when they got together, you know, my grandfather and grandmother. And that was my mother's mother and my father's father. And that's the only ones that I've heard talking the language, full language.
Around the age of 6, I heard Aboriginal language spoken for the first time, and this woke every blood cell vessel in my body, sparking off a curiosity and a thirst to know more. It was an insult hearing all the world's languages being spoken on our Australian shores, but Australian Aboriginal language was unheard of. This for me was a hard pill to swallow. It has been a family lifelong goal to hear my Victorian mob speak the language and understand our culture. A goal that was set by my beloved elders before me, and a goal I knew I had the skills and knowledge to contribute to. There have been many challenges and obstacles along the way, but I will never regret where I came from to be where I am today. From my own language background and my immediate family history, I have been able to piece together Victoria's Yorta Yorta language, which belongs to the Upper Murray, Goulburn River country. Adapting it back from being spoken as singular words on word lists to using the grammar of the Yorta Yorta language, creating sentences and being able to speak in dialogue so that it can be used in conversation.
When you're Napo, where is my mother?
At this stage, we're having a good time with the school. They're enjoying coming to school. Wow. They don't want to stay home. And, you know, you can only break down relationships through learning about other people's culture. If we don't empower our kids through the many different cultures that live here, then there's always going to be that difference. You know, not only should they be learning about Aboriginality and Yorta Yorta here at Gowrie Street, but, you know, maybe they should be learning about Muslims and maybe they should be learning about Africans.
It's been a challenge. I won't say it hasn't been. I think that one of the hardest things for me was that was moving on from what we'd already done and trying to help people understand that this wasn't about shutting down or stopping culture and stuff happening. It was actually about improving it and giving everybody the opportunity to do it as well. And I think that it's really important for our wider community. We've got a lot of families that don't know their own culture. And it's that thing about you don't know what you don't know. And until you find out, you don't know how you're going to react to it either. You're not going to sure what feelings it's going to invoke. You know, whether you're going to be proud, scared, sad, confused. Fear. You know, and that's the reality of it. And I think that we've got a lot of work to do in that. And I think by involving all of those kids at a language level and a cultural level right now, that's a really important process. History will show at Gowrie Street we've had a segregated annex for 20 years. That's a lot of unsure assumptions, if you like, or beliefs to undo.
It teaches un-Indigenous people our language, and some Indigenous people might not know the language, and it teaches the Indigenous people something about their culture.
That you learn new things and you get to speak the language.
It teaches you heaps of things, and the people that aren't Yorta Yorta can learn stuff that they already don't know.
The Aboriginals were here before, like the
Australians.
So that led us to look down a different path. What were we going to do? How were we going to change and what were we going to make? How were we going to make it successful for our kids? Lucky enough that Aretha showed up on our doorstep with Ryan and was a speaker of Yorta Yorta, and so from that point we've built to where we are now. Go. As educators, if we're going to ask our kids to be part of this, then we need to have an understanding and appreciation and learn as well. And I think that what you'll find is that there's teachers here that have been here for 20 years. You know, they were here when Manninga started and they're still here now. And they will, I would say, confidently say that they've learnt more in the last 6 to 8 months about Indigenous culture and language than what they would have learnt in that 20 years here. Mamo, mamo, kawo, kawo, woro, woro. Uka, uka, kata, kata, yukun, yukun, minga, minga, mamo, mamo, kawo, kawo, minga, mamo, kawo, kawo, muru, kawo, muru, minga, mamo, kawo, muru. We all clap hands together.
And that's the same, you know, and all going out at night time and see our people up there, we call it you down here, I think, call it the goon dog. Yeah. Do you? It's the goon dog, the big dog. Yeah. And up home they used to call him the Mariula. See? He was named the Mariula. And that dog was, I think it was all over Australia, and every Aboriginal, because they talk about it. They talk about it, that they've seen that too.
We haven't had you answer one yet. Yes. Very good. Well
A big difference in the Indigenous kids really taking ownership over what they're doing and their culture, and taking a good involvement in it. And the other kids are all eager to learn about it, which is good.
Doing this documentary has been a healing journey, as I feel like I have released my nan and mum now, and all the ancestors from their trauma. They never did surrender their language and culture, or their land, and in their life's efforts, made it clear that future generations should follow. I now feel free to release the suppressed truth of Yulupna country and set my ancestors free. I have grown to believe Australian people can unite under the Aboriginal language and culture umbrella and celebrate our country's beautiful uniqueness by making it compulsory for all schools to offer a language and cultural component, along with the true history of the local region. I think it would be good to see all the fear of the unknown about Aboriginals becoming the strength of this country's united future. I dedicate this film in memory of my mum, Margaret Werapunda Nee Briggs, and to my sons Tarrant Wingill and Ryan Manara.